Welcome to Focused on Forward. The purpose of this podcast is to focus on recovery from life situations, be it a disease, chronic or acute, perhaps the loss of someone so dear to you in death, or a change of life patterns that has affected you so profoundly that you have no choice but to find your new normal and become focused on moving forward. Each episode is designed to show the positivity that people bring to each and every one of their stories, the successes they've had, ways that they have become so definitively focused on moving forward. We look forward to sharing their stories, and we hope that they inspire you just as much as they have inspired us. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the show. Good afternoon, and welcome to Focused on Forward. I'm excited today to bring you a really cool guest. Her name is Liz Priestley, and Liz is going to talk to us in a few moments about a movie that she is bringing to the big screens, and with really cool co-stars. And it's a story that I didn't know was a thing, but I can't wait to see it. I'll be honest with you guys. And so when she talks about this in a few minutes, you guys are going to be really, I'm hoping you're as blown away by the concept and the idea of the movie as I am. I think it's fantastic and phenomenal. But in the meantime, what we're going to talk about is Liz's journey through life. And we're going to pay attention to the struggles, not only mentally but emotionally, that she would had to go through as an actress to get this movie off the ground for all these years that she's been working on this, and how that played into her own mental health and well-being. So we're really excited to have you on today, Liz. Thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm so excited for this.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do here is I'm going to let you go ahead and start off, tell your own story, and I'll jump in from time to time with some questions. Okay.
Sure. Well, I mean, my story, it probably starts out the same way most actors' stories are. I got bitten by the acting bug when I was a kid, and I was fascinated with the idea that you could play pretend and make a living doing that. And as soon as I found out that that was like a job, I was floored by that. I was like, wait a second, we get to play pretend and I get paid to do this? Yes, that is the job for me. So from about age 7 onward, I knew that that was what I wanted to do. And very specifically, I knew I wanted to make movies. Um, I have older siblings, and I got to see them perform on stage in like high school plays and stuff. And that was really interesting to me. But even then, I knew, I was like, there's a difference between being in front of a live audience and being in front of a camera. And I want to be in front of a camera. Um, so from age 7 up through now, it's been a pursuit of that dream. But life happens, and so along the way I had a few detours, pretty significant ones. um and looking back on it, I'm grateful that I had them, but at the time they definitely took a toll, mentally and emotionally, as you said. um it's funny because where I live here in Philadelphia, most people who know me as a musician and a singer, and they don't really know me as an actor. And that is because around the same time that I got the acting bug was about the same time that I started playing instruments. I started with violin, and I kept that up for about 18, 19 years. I still play, but not as well as I did. I can pull it out for an audition here or there, but um, that started my journey with my love of music. And so yeah, I started violin. I added piano around age 10, and then in high school, I decided I wanted to try singing, and I decided to study classical opera. And it turns out that singing was, out of everything that I was doing, singing was the stronger talent of mine. And so it became very clear, at least to my parents, that music was an avenue I could choose to go down as well. But I still had that part of me that was like, music is a really fun hobby, but my passion is acting. And that is something my parents, it took them a very long time to understand and to come to terms with. So we had, I don't want to say arguments, but we had some significant conversations, I'll say.
Discussions.
Yeah,
Discussions.
very, very intense discussions. Um, Particularly when it came to the end of high school, going into college. What are you going to do with your life? At that point, I was ready to just pack the car full of Tupperware and drive out to LA and just try my, try my luck. Fortunately, my parents stepped in and said, absolutely not. We're not, no.
They kept all the
um,
lids that would have matched anyway, you know.
yeah, I mean, it would have been tough. It would have been tough. So yeah, my parents were like, no, you can't do that. You got to go to college. But, we think you should study music. You have this gift. And truly, again, as an adult looking back, I can appreciate the unique circumstances that I was in. Here I was, this little, African American kid in the suburbs studying classical opera. Like I stuck out like a very sore thumb. And and it wasn't just that I was studying, it was that, I was winning scholarships, I won awards, I was performing at places that, people twice my age had never, performed at. So um I can certainly see why music was heavy in the discussion. I had won a scholarship to Settlement Music School to study, and through that, I competed and won the Mario Lanza Award here in Philadelphia, which is it's a big music award. Um, I got to sing the national anthem at George Washington University the year that my sister graduated from law school.
Cool.
um yeah, it was, I mean, I got to sing, the national anthem at an Eagles game. Like it was, all these opportunities were coming left and right. The coolest of which was I got to meet and take a class with Audra McDonald, who is a Broadway star.
Okay.
um
Yeah.
and similar to me, African American woman, uh classically opera trained, and in this kind of musical theater world at a time where there weren't a lot of people who looked like her or sounded like her. um and I got to meet her and I got to sing for her, and I got to see her perform, and it was really cool. So um yeah. And I should mention this. I grew up in a religious household. So there was that aspect of, we don't want you to waste your God-given talents. And, so I had a lot of, I struggled a lot with the guilt of, but this is what I feel passionate about. And this is where my talents are. So it was this sort of, um at that point in my life, it didn't seem like the two were in the same place, and so I had a lot of guilt and struggle about, well, where do I go,
Sure.
what do I pursue?
Sure.
um
Especially if you felt like they weren't running parallel to each other, they weren't
yeah,
assisting each other. Yeah, I can see that.
so it was hard, and so I thought, you know what, maybe I can compromise. I will go to school for musical theater. That way I get all of the training, and no matter what happens, I'll be the most, well-rounded performer, and I'll have all of the training under my belt. So my parents said okay to that. So I went to Ithaca College and I studied, and Ithaca's run like a conservatory where you have no other classes outside of your major. So it was all acting, all singing, all dancing all the time, and it was fabulous. And I'm glad I did it. At the time, it was really tough. They have a cut system there, so they can cut you anytime during the first 2 years. And so that was tough because I kept thinking, "Oh gosh, that's it. I'm out of here. They're gonna cut me." And
It'll
then,
keep you on your toes for sure.
yeah, and and they figured out really early on, oh, Liz is a student we have to keep on her toes. Or, if we tell her she's good, she's just going to rest on that and try to coast through. So we got to, so they were tricky. All the first 2 years they were kind of like, "Oh, I'm sure that was your best effort." Kind of
Oh
thing. And I'd
man,
be like,
head
"Oh."
games. Head games.
But they were absolutely right. Keeping me on my toes pushed me to work harder because I didn't want to get cut. So, ultimately they were right. But at the time it was stressful. But I graduated and I moved to New York, and I was a working actor. I was performing, I was doing shows, and then I got cast in a national tour, and I got to tour the country for 6 months, performing in a musical, and everything was basically set, and I was like, this is great, everything's going exactly as I planned, and then I had a baby.
That'll change a lot
And
of things very quickly.
that changed everything. I thought, I number one, I was like, I want to go home and be close to family because this is not something I've ever navigated, and I think I need mom and dad close by. So I moved back home to Philly, and I decided, you know what, New York is gonna be there. I can go back whenever, but for now, I'm gonna uh, be a mom, and that was a huge decision because, as I said, everything was kind of on the upward, path, and everything was moving and things are falling into place. I had been interviewed by a couple agencies in New York, and people were interested in working with me. So it was a significant deal to say I'm walking away from all of that and I'm gonna raise a kid. But I did. I moved home to Philly, and I thought, I'll be here for maybe 2 years tops, and really get my feet on the ground and figure out what I want, and I'll be good. We're looking at 13 years later, and I'm still in Philly.
So a little longer than 2 years.
Little longer. Um, but it was a great decision in hindsight. So yeah, I decided, let me raise my child. So that was first and foremost. And then after about 2 or 3 years, um, I started realizing, hey, Philly's got a really thriving theater scene, you know, let me check that out. So I started auditioning for plays around here, and I started getting parts. And this is after stepping away, like I said, for about 3 years. So I hadn't done anything in the 3 years. Um,
So during that
just
3 years, you were just mom.
just mom,
Just
just
mom.
mom.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And it was great. And I worked like a 9 to 5, and just to put food on the table and do the whole thing. And at this point, I was still working 9 to 5s. But the funny thing is, I was bouncing from industry to industry, just trying to find something that resonated as much as performing had. Um, and
Okay.
so, yeah, I was working in offices. I cleaned. I put myself through EMT school, and was an EMT for 2 years. I worked in the restaurant industry, the trash industry. I've worked at a gym. I mean, like anything you could
Kind of
possibly
sounds
think
like a
of,
you name it, you did it.
pretty much.
Pretty much.
Yeah,
Okay.
I tried everything, and I really I guess my mindset at the time was, look, I'm never going to be a full-time actress again. That dream is gone, but at least, if I find something that maybe I can enjoy just as much, it won't hurt so bad, right? So I tried everything. I worked as a barista at one
Sure.
point. I still teach now, actually. um I was a teacher's assistant. I worked in insurance. I did, just about everything.
But when you found
Um,
a love like that, trying to fill that void can be very difficult.
it was
Because
miserable.
yeah,
It was
because
miserable. Yeah.
yeah, because everything else that you're doing is only filling a portion of that void. It's
Yes.
not it's not topping it off like it would have on anything else.
And that's
So,
when you develop unhealthy habits because you realize that the void is not being filled. So, that's when you start drinking too much, or you start, hanging out with the wrong people, and all of that happened. And it was a depressing time because I really was lost, and I knew it. I knew it. I was like, this is what I want to be doing, but I don't have the means to do that right now. So I got to do something else. And it just was like whatever I tried. Um, Initially for the first couple of weeks, it might be exciting because it's a new job. But then, eventually
reality.
I would find myself sitting there like, this doesn't make me happy. This is just.
Okay. So,
Um,
what were you trying to do during those times when you're trying to fill the void with these other projects? You said there were some unhealthy habits that
mhm,
crept in.
mhm.
So, at a detailed level that you're comfortable with sharing, what were some of the things that you engaged in that you tried to distract yourself with?
Well, certainly my alcohol intake went up. I can say that comfortably. Um, I'm not someone who ever really had a problem with alcohol previously. Um, and I'm adopted, and so I don't know if alcoholism runs in my family or not. But I certainly noticed, at least initially, when it became clear that, look, acting is going to be on the back burner for now. You need to find another job that's going to allow you to put food on the table and, you know, pay your bills and all that good stuff. Um, I remember distinctly being like, because I had gotten a small little one bedroom apartment. My infant daughter and I shared a bedroom, and I lived right around the corner from like a wine and spirits. And I distinctly remember being like, "Gosh, I hope they don't look at me funny that I've been in here several times this week." Um, so that was the beginning of it. I definitely was very, very depressed. And again, I don't know if any of this runs in my biological family. And this was one of the first times where I was like, it would have been very helpful for me to maybe have a medical history like that.
Yeah, something,
Um,
some type of chart. Yeah.
yeah, it was bad. I mean, at one point, I mean, I did get suicidal. I was depressed, severely depressed. And I had a little bit of a suicide scare. For clarification, I never actually tried to commit suicide, but there was a point where I felt very, very low and I was scared for myself. So I
Yeah,
made the
but
call.
considering it though can be
Yeah.
just as scary as
Exactly. And that
getting to
was
that point.
kind of that was the wake up call, was the fact that, oh my goodness, I'm sitting here considering it. You know what I mean? And that, to me, that was significant. So I made the call. I called the National Suicide Hotline and I was like, I need help. I don't really know what's going on here, but I need help.
Well,
And
thank
I
you
was
for
able
doing
to
that.
thank
Seriously.
you.
No, that's awesome
Yeah,
that you did. There's I want so strongly for people to realize, and somebody wrote this on Facebook the other day, a good friend of ours, um, that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And
mm,
I that has stuck with me and resonated so strongly with me over the last little bit, because I know of several people who have taken that route,
yeah,
because they felt it was their only route, at
yeah,
that time.
yeah.
And I'm so thankful for everyone that I hear who did what you just did, and made that call. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, I
I'm glad that I
appreciate
have
that.
the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, this is about 10 years ago now, looking back. And again, hindsight is always, you look back and you go, gosh, I can't believe I was there. I can't believe I did that. But, 10 years ago, I was a mess. I mean, I really just was I felt so lost. And like I said, I mean, I knew what I had wanted to do since I was about 7. So all of a sudden, here I am, and it's almost 20 years later, and it's like, I had no direction. I didn't even have training in other areas of life, and I've got a baby, and it was a dark time for me, for real. And um ultimately, I'm very glad that I made the call. I did do a voluntary hospital stay for about 6 days. And I'm very open with that. Anyone who knows me, I've talked to people about this. I talk to them about it all the time
That's
because,
good.
yes, there is a huge stigma around mental health. And when you're having these kinds of problems, there's a stigma around talking about what can happen or what you need to do to come out of it. Um, and I just think that's so ridiculous
It's
because,
sad, actually.
frankly, yeah, frankly, if I hadn't made that call, if I hadn't done that hospital stay, I don't know where I would be right now, or even if I would be here. Um, but it was, and I should clarify too, this was not the first time that I had um, been in therapy. I actually took myself to therapy when I was in college. Around then I started feeling sort of apprehension of, like, what's going to happen after I graduate. I don't really know. This is such an unstable industry that I'm trying to get into, like, and so I started talking to someone then, just because I thought maybe I should get a handle on, how to deal with these feelings of anxiety and things like that.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Develop coping mechanisms now.
Absolutely, coping mechanisms are so necessary. They're so necessary. And this is an industry where they'll say, you hear more no's than yes. So you have to have a tough skin if you're going to be an actor, because for every 100 auditions that you go on, you're only going to hear one yes, which means you're going to hear 99, no's. And um, if you don't know how to handle that, you're not going to be able to last in this industry. Like, you need to be able to do an audition, shake it off, and move on. And a lot of actors, they have their hearts pinned on this one audition, and then it doesn't come through and it just destroys them. And I used to be that way. So yeah, there was a lot of anxiety that goes with this
Handling
industry as well.
rejection and yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I'm grateful that like I said, I'm glad I made the call. I'm glad I did the hospital stay. I got to, as part of my stay there, we did, group therapy, and it helped me put some things into perspective, to really listen to other people who were struggling. And some people who had much more severe struggles than I did, in terms of, like, they have to be taking daily medication. And I take medication, but it's not daily type of thing. Um, so it was an eye-opening experience for me, but it was really helpful, and I'm glad, ultimately I'm very glad that I was there. Although, for my family, it was jarring for them.
Oh yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I called in the middle of the night, and this is my only gripe about this whole process, is that, if you call and say, yes, I'll go to the hospital, they show up right then and there, which is great, because if you're really in trouble, you need someone right there.
Right then, right now.
But
But
I was like,
but
I'm not in immediate danger. It's also 3 o'clock in the morning. Can we do this maybe in like 3 or 4 hours? And they were like, nope. And so, it's like I had to have a parent come in the middle of the night to get my infant. And it was jarring for them. Um, to be like, what do you mean I have to come get your kid? And where are you going? But ultimately, my parents were incredibly supportive and have always been very supportive. So, um, it was a good thing. But after that, after I got out of the hospital, I moved back in with my parents for about a year. And I was really, like, I noticed a big change after I moved back in with them. I started working out, and like, just starting to get back into things. I started auditioning for shows in Philly. And before you knew it, it was like I was booking one show, and then another show, and then another show. And at one point, I was doing so many shows back to back at the same time, that I was in rehearsals for three different shows every single day of the week. So I had to have a schedule where it's like my parents could babysit, like, on Tuesday and Thursday. And then I had to have, like, a friend babysit on Monday, Wednesday. And then I brought my kid to rehearsals on Saturday, Sunday. It was crazy. But it was really exciting too, because I just started booking shows. Um, and
my
I picked
biggest
that up.
question for you on that
Yeah.
is how do you keep three separate shows in your mind at one time? Because I'm assuming based on your and I'm making a broad assumption here, so just go with me.
Yeah.
Based on what you've told me of your history with music theater, I'm assuming that there were some songs and perhaps even a little bit of dancing in all of these shows. And keeping all of that straight in your head is, I find to be incredibly impressive because I would
Yeah,
have been like, you know,
it was,
all over the place.
it was a little tricky. And I do remember at the time my parents sort of going, another show? You're doing another one? I'm like, yes, I am. And they're like, okay. Um, it helps when the characters are all wildly different. So, like, at that time, I was in one musical, and then the other two shows, I was playing a villain, and the other one, I was playing a romantic lead, but it was a straight play. So and then the third one was a musical. So I was able to, when it came time to memorizing and things, I was like, oh, okay, this is that show. Oh, and this is the thing that goes before that song. Oh, and this is the time where I have to go in and yell at this girl. Oh, okay. And I don't know. All the rehearsals feel so different. So and like I said, there were some shows where I was lucky enough to work with people who, they had kids themselves, and they would just be like, "Oh yeah, bring your kid to rehearsal. It's fine," um, which was really great too because my daughter is a wonderful actress. I'm biased, but she's actually pretty good,
We're okay
and
with that. Go for it.
yeah, and so she used to sit there and watch our rehearsals. If they were, kid friendly. I remember there were a couple shows where I was like, okay, you cannot listen to this. So bring your headphones or bring your little laptop or whatever. And, she would do stuff. Um, but it was definitely, it was a blessing to work with people who said, yeah, I understand being a parent. Go ahead, bring your kid.
That's cool.
So that was lovely. But yeah, I worried for about a split second about, oh, what if I get all these shows confused? And then I was like, whatever, I'm going to figure out a way. And then I figured out a way. But it was wonderful. And so I kept that up for about 9-ish years. Yeah, just about. And then and meanwhile, like I said, working my way through just every industry that I could, trying to find something. Even though I was acting in the evenings, I was still like, I've got to do a 9 to 5. I've got bills to pay, I've got stuff I need to do. And then but I was slowly, putting some money away here and there, just a little bit here, a little bit there. And then in 2018, March of 2018, I finally was like, you know what? I am at a point now financially where I could make a change. And if I decide I want to do acting full time, I have now the financial freedom to kind of do this. So, so I was working as a barista, and I asked a friend of mine. I'd seen my friend at the time. My friend, I had seen him on TV, and I said, you must have an agent because you're on TV. I see you in this commercial. You must have an agent." He said, "I have a manager." I said, "Do you know if she's taking new people?" He said, "I'll ask." So the next day I get a call from his manager, and she said, "Why don't you come down and audition for me?" And I said, "Okay." And I go, and I was nervous. And at this point, I don't get nervous for auditions anymore. Like, they're old hat, you know what I mean? But I
Right. It's
was
something
nervous.
you've become accustomed to because you've done
Yeah.
them so often.
Yeah. At this point, I'm very good at, even now, I'm very good at, even if it's a part that I really, really want, I can go in, do my thing. And then I usually give myself about an hour to stress about it because I've decided you can't just not, like, you can't just pretend like it didn't happen because that's just not realistic.
Right. No,
So I
it's
give
not healthy to
myself,
swallow that down and keep that all bottled up.
yeah. So you give yourself about an hour to be like, oh, how am I gonna, oh, or like, oh gosh, I wish I'd done better. And that's it. That's it. You leave it. And that's it. And that works for me. So yeah, but I was nervous about this one. I said, I've never auditioned for someone strictly for camera work. All of my credits and everything that I've built up for the last 9 years, and really my entire life up until now, has been nothing but stage credits. I have no film, no camera work, nothing. And that's what I wanted to do. And specifically, I said, I'm going to meet this woman and I'm going to tell her I want to do camera work. And I hope she thinks I'm good enough. And I hope she's like, sure, there's something we can do here. So I auditioned for her, and she was just like, yeah, yeah, like, I want to sign you. I want to work with you. And I was like, what?
Well,
So
that's cool. Yeah.
yeah. So I signed with her. And so that was March 2018. And I booked my first commercial in May of 2018. And I just started getting more commercial work. And that is a fabulous, by the way, if you do nothing but commercials, that is a fabulous line of work in the industry because it's a lot of money. They're usually all very varied. Um, I did a commercial for Safe Auto, where in the commercial it's implied that we're supposed to be in a city that's like similar to like New York or whatever. But it was cheaper for them to fly everyone in the production to Uruguay in South America to double for New York than it would be to shoot in New York. So I got a free trip to South America to shoot a
Okay.
commercial. I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. I'll just do commercials. This is awesome. You know what I mean? Um,
I I can't even believe that that's a thing. That would
that's
be the thing.
they paid for, my flight. They picked me up from my apartment, the flight, and it's, first class, because if you're union then they have to, it's a certain class. So, and then I'm down there and they give you a per diem. So of course I went out. Uruguay apparently is known for their steak. I don't know what they're feeding their cattle down there, but we need to take note. It is it's like melt in your mouth good. Like
Yes, yes, please.
I can't even, like, I just want to take trips to Uruguay just so I could be like, no, try the steak. But yeah, like it's a fabulous part of the industry. I love it. But so that started happening. I started booking commercials. And then after a while, I get a phone call and they say, Miss Priestley, you've done X amount of commercials now, and you need to join the union, which I had wanted to join since I was 12. Um, so they said, yeah, you've done all your waivers. You need to join the union. I was like, oh my gosh. So I did that. And then I get a call in July, no, June 2019. Um, my manager called and she's like, "Oh, I'm sending you an audition for a film." And I've auditioned for a couple films. Oh, I have to tell you this too before that. So after I'd done these commercials, I got called for a TV show in New York. And I was like, cool. And I went up and I auditioned twice. And it was so funny because I only had one line. But I auditioned twice and I got the part. And I was like, awesome. Well, when they send you the audition stuff, it's all in code and they give you an alternate name and you can't really figure it out. I had an idea, but I couldn't really figure it out. So then they send you the real thing and I see Jessica Jones across the top. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be connected to the Marvel universe. Like, I was floored. I was like, oh my
Right?
gosh, I have a connection with Iron Man and like Captain America. Like, I
How
can't.
cool would that be? Yeah.
So I go up and they shot the show in Brooklyn. I did the show and I walked right by Kristen Ritter. Like we walked by each other. I was like, hello. She's like, hi. I was like, and I had my scene was with Rachel Taylor, who played Trish.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so we did our scene, we did the whole thing, and a couple weeks later, and meanwhile, I tell everybody, everybody. And then a couple weeks later, I get a call. Oh, Miss Priestley, we're so sorry. We had to cut your part for time. I was like,
Oh man.
but they said, well, the good news is, you can still audition for other Marvel stuff because apparently, if you do the one, that's it. You can't be anybody else in the universe because, but they were like, you're still open for other Marvel stuff. And I was like, cool. Sure. This is like pre Black Panther. So I was like, yeah, get my info over to them.
Right?
Right. But so then, yeah, shortly after that, I get another script from my manager. She's like, it's for a movie. And I'm reading it and it's like, all I see on my script is like, this woman, she's a mother, 15-year-old boy. It said in the script, it looks like she's lived a hard life. I was like, oof. Uh and then like on another page, I see something and it's like, Black Cowboys, Philadelphia, something. And I'm like, huh, okay. And like somewhere over here in my head, somewhere, I remembered reading something or seeing something on the news about like Idris Elba, Black Cowboys, something. And I
Right.
didn't
Okay.
connect the two thoughts at all. So I was like, sure. So I go in, I do my audition. And mind you, um, this was a part that I had never really been called in for before because I get called in for very upbeat, I call them Walmart moms or Target moms. You know what I mean? You know exactly what, as soon as I
I
said it, you
do.
laughed. So
I knew exactly what you meant.
you
Yes.
know exactly. It's the who's ready for school. I get those all the time. And that's fine. I can do those, in my sleep. It's great. But this was not that. This was a woman at the time of when I got the script sent, because it changed. Um, she was a drug addict. She was going to rehab. The scene that they gave me, she was being thrown out of her apartment, like trash bags dumped on the sidewalk, thrown out of her apartment type of thing. Um,
So a very gritty role in
very,
comparison.
very, and like I said, it said she looks like she's lived a hard life. So I said to my manager, I said, "Is it all right if I go in there looking a little rough?" And she said, "Yeah, do your thing." So I did. I will say this: I stayed up for days at a time, like about 3 days in a row, no sleep, and I I cried a lot off and on during those days, because when I cry, my eyes get extremely red and puffy. So I cried a lot, stayed up. I just ran the lines over and over and over again. My friend who introduced me to this manager, who's now my boyfriend, he helped me. We stayed up and ran lines. Like, I was like, "Come on, you gotta run the lines again." He'd be like, "It's 3 in the morning." I'm like, "Time to run lines." Um, and then I used makeup to give myself some really really dark circles and like a reddish nose and all that good stuff. And I went in with some torn clothes. I looked bad. I looked really bad. Um, went in, did the audition, did my thing, and I left. And I felt good about it, but I was like, whatever. So then they call me like a couple days later and they say, "Oh, you've got a call back for this part." And we're sending you 3 additional scenes. Make sure that you have them all memorized. So at that point I'm like, well, that's unusual, because normally I've gone to New York, all the way up to New York from Philly, just to say, "What do you mean he's in the garage? Thank you." You know what I mean? Like, that's it. So the fact that they were sending me 4 scenes was like, so I start doing a little digging, and I finally see, you know, Idris Elba shooting a movie in Philadelphia about black cowboys. And I see a little more about, Elba plays the father of a 15-year-old son. So I go back to my script and I see something about, in my scene, my 15-year-old son. So I go, "Wait a second, hang on, hang on. Is this the same movie as the Idris Elba thing?" And I don't know if my manager ever knew and just didn't purposely tell me because she knew I'd be like anxious, or if she just legit didn't know. But that's when I kind of put together, oh, this is the son of Idris's character, which means I'm the wife of Idris's character. So at that point, I'm like, well, they're not going to give the part to an unknown. They must be looking for a stand in for Kerry Washington, because of course they must be. So, sure, sure, sure. I'll be Kerry's stand in. Absolutely. Makes sense. So, I immediately talked myself out of the role. I was
So
like, they're not
you
going to,
discredited yourself and just said,
yeah,
"Yeah, I there's no way."
immediately. I
Okay.
was like, I'm looking at my resume and I'm like, I have no film credits here. And this is a starring role with Idris Elba. Nah, they're looking for a stand-in, and that's fine. I'd love to stand in. Maybe I'll meet Idris. Maybe I'll get to be on set for a couple of days. It'll be fun. So I go in, I do the second audition, and I leave. And same process, mind you, same staying up, crying, horrible process. Um, and then like 2 days after that, I get another call, and they're like, "We want you to come in again, and this time the director would like to meet you." And I was like, "Okay, because that doesn't happen if he's not interested." So then they kind of let it slip that, well, there's a discussion happening, but behind the scenes. Um, so as I understand it, at that point, the producers were like, we should get a name for this part so we can guarantee butts and seats because there was no pandemic at this point, you know. So we should get a name. We should call Carrie. We should call, Lupita. We should call, all these other people. And the director was like, I've seen her tape. I want her. I'm going to Philly to meet her.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. So that I was like, really? So I go in a third time, do my thing. I met the director and he shakes my hand. And then I left and I was like, I really want that part. Like now I really want it. I've been here 3 times. Like I want that part, you know? Um so it was a little harder for me to shake, but and then like the day after that, I got the call that you got the part. And I remember the casting person, she called me directly at home and she said, you got the part. And I was like, oh, thank you. Just went over my head. Like, sure,
Didn't hit that at that
And
moment.
my yeah, and my parents were away on a cruise, so I remember trying to call them and being like, "Please call me. I know you're in the middle of the ocean. Please call me back. I have news." And then they call me, and I said to them, "Oh, I got the part," and they were like, "Oh, that's nice." Like it did not register for any of us
Good on
really
you.
how
Way to
big this
go.
was. Like we're all just like, "Oh my goodness, you got it. Cool. Awesome." And then I was like, I got sent the script. I read the whole thing and I get a call and they say, hey, Miss Priestley, I don't know if you read the whole script by now, which of course I had, but you need to be on a horse, which means we need to send you to horse camp. And that's when I freaked out because I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm
Right?
really in this. Oh my gosh, I'm going to horse camp. Like, that's when I lost it. It was like, I'm going to horse camp. And that was wild. That was wild because I am severely allergic to horses. And I did not want
Oh,
to tell them because I was like, I'm going to get fired. They're going to fire me. So I was like, I'm not going to tell anyone. I'm not going to tell anyone. I'm just going to go to the doctor and get something. Like, I'll be fine. Um, yeah. So I went to horse camp for a day. That was hilarious. And then like 2 weeks later, I show up on set and it's like there's Idris Elba and there's Caleb McLaughlin from Stranger Things and he plays my son in the movie, and across the way there's Method Man. Like it was the most ridiculous set of circumstances I have ever been a part of that led me to this moment, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly how that happened. But suffice it to say, I got to make my film debut as the wife of Idris Elba and the mother of Caleb McLaughlin in a little movie called Concrete Cowboy that is coming out in like 2 months or like 2 or 3 months. I'm assuming I'm hearing early 2021, and a little birdie told me that means January, February. So
that'd be cool. Yeah, I'm looking
yeah.
forward to seeing that.
Me too. Yeah. So and it was, that in and of itself made it really special. The fact that, it was like the culmination of a childhood dream and I'm working with like one of the biggest stars in the world and it was very cool. But what also made it very special to me was the subject matter in and of itself, which is it's this father-son story. My son is acting up in our home in Detroit, and I just am like, and oh, and also that's when my character changed. They decided to make her um a professional. They decided to make her a nurse. They took out the whole drug storyline. They took out the whole eviction storyline, and they just made her a nurse and just a mom who's at the end of her rope and doesn't really know what else to do. And I was very happy that they took that out, because we've seen that before, and I was like, I don't know how convincing I am at that anyway. Mm. But she just decides, I think you need your father's influence in your life, so she drives him um, overnight to basically dump him on his father's doorstep in Philadelphia. But what's cool is that, he doesn't know that his dad is this leader of a group of black cowboys in Philadelphia. And when I was getting my costume fitting for this movie, I said to the costume person, I was like, "So this is like a fantasy story, right? Like this isn't real." She's like, "No, you need to do some research." And I did a deep dive, and turns out the Black Cowboys of Philly are a real thing. It's a real group, and I felt such shame because I'm from here, born and raised. I live here, and I didn't know that they were real. Like I had no clue.
Right.
So if I didn't know, that means a lot of people don't
Well, you
know.
can include me in the list of those who didn't know. Matter of fact, after the first time you and I talked
Hmm.
a week or so back, yeah, I did some Google searching on that, and it's a really cool thing. And I've been to Philly a couple times. Clearly, more sightseeing than anything.
Hmm.
But I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know that that was a possibility of a thing. And
Yeah,
when you described this to me the first time, I have to be honest, I thought that it too was a fantasy style story,
yeah.
something where somebody just kind of put cowboys in the middle of this urban development area. And I'm just like, okay, sure, yeah. Um, and then I did some research on it, and I'm like, it was kind of like one of those moments where you're like mind blown.
Yep, yep.
And yeah, it's a really really cool idea. It would have been a really cool idea for a movie, but it's even cooler that it's based in reality.
Yeah, I mean, what I hope is that when people see this story and they hear the story of this group of people, that somebody does make a movie just on them because they are fascinating. And 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 it's not just Philly. It's major cities around the country, and they've been there since the Civil War, which makes it even more like, oh my gosh, how did I not
That's
know
the cool
about this?
tie-in. Yeah.
Yeah. um but it's very cool. In our movie we got to shoot at Fletcher Street Stables, which is a real stables here in North Philly, and a bunch of their cowboys play cowboys in our movie. And in fact, one of our main roles, one of my ex-husband's good friends, is a cowboy by the name of Paris, and it's played by an actual cowboy, uh, Mil Prattis, who has never acted a day in his life. You know what I mean? And he's so good. Like he's so I'm blown away by this group of people because they are so open, and they were so open with all of us. Um, if somebody was in the saddle and they'd be not sitting quite right, they'd be like, no, you gotta sit like this, you gotta hold the thing like this, or yo, you would wear your gloves like this, or the hat like this, or if you do this, that means this, or like they were so awesome
That's
with
cool,
us
keeping
on
you on
this
point.
on this thing. Yeah, make it authentic. And yeah, so I'm excited for people just to be like, oh my gosh, that's a real place. And they're losing, they and all the other stables like them, they're losing funding, left and right. And I'm sure the pandemic is not doing them any favors, just like the rest of us. But um they exist to really just keep our kids off the streets, give them a place to go and teach them a whole skill. I mean, caring for an animal in and of itself is a skill, but when you're caring for a horse, I mean, and you have to do the whole bit. You got to clean the stalls, you got to clean up the poop, you got to brush down the horse, you got to wash the horses before you ever even get to the stage where you can ride the
Right, there's a
horse.
lot of work behind the scenes.
Yeah. So I'm like, I think it's such a wonderful, beautiful place that exists right in the heart of our city. It's just another example of something else where we've been kind of whitewashed out of the conversation. Um and movies had a huge part in that. I mean, really, we took the John Wayne narrative and ran with it and really pushed black cowboys out of the conversation, despite the fact that the word cowboy is a slave term. And because it comes from slavery, which a lot of people don't know. If you worked in the house, you were a houseboy. If you worked in the stables, you were a stable boy. If you worked with the cows, you were a cowboy. That's where that word comes from.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's where it comes from. And then at one point, in history, 75% of all cowboys were black. That's not something we see reflected in movies at
No,
all.
not at all.
Yeah, so it's really, I think it's really cool to be able to bring that part of the story back to us a little bit and to show, like, no, we've been here all along. We just haven't been represented.
Oh,
And
that's
then to
cool. I
have,
like that.
yeah, and then to have someone as big and as famous as Idris Elba behind it, portraying one of these guys. I mean, you really can't ask for a better.
Phenomenal actor.
Yeah, I mean, come on. And
Love his
and
stuff.
he was so gracious and wonderful. And you know, somebody asked me, I mean, multiple people have asked me, they're like, "Oh my gosh, what was it like?" I'm like, Idris Elba is exactly as charming and as awesome and as like good looking and all of that as you think he is, which makes it harder to love him in some ways because you're just like, where is your flaw, sir? Where? Um, no, he's like one of the kindest, most decent people I've ever had the pleasure of having a conversation with. And I'm just like, dang,
That's
like
cool.
you're awesome. And
That's cool.
he has been really championing this community and what they stand for. And I'm so happy that he has become in many ways a voice for them. I'm really happy about that because in a lot of ways you can't ask for a better person to be your spokesperson, you know what I mean? So
No, I
yeah, I'm
that's
excited.
about as A-list as you get.
Yeah, exactly. So
So
yeah, he's
cool.
he's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see that movie come out. I'm excited
Excuse me.
to see, see how it gets portrayed and everything else. But let's we're getting close to our time here, but
Mhm.
let's talk real quick um about the theme of our show is focused on forward. And one of the things that we like to make sure of is we talked briefly about some of your challenges and some of the things that you've had to overcome.
Mhm.
Um, but looking back on your life, and this is something I ask every single guest,
Sure.
looking back over your life's experiences, and not to minimize it down to one sentence or saying, but what's the single greatest thing that you have learned throughout your journey? The thing that resonates with you from day to day that helps keep you moving forward.
I honestly think for me it's as simple as keep moving forward no matter how long it takes. Because there have been many points in the last 25 years. Because if you add all of this up, it's been about 25, 26 years that I've been pursuing a film career. Um, and there have been many, many times along that journey where, I've been fleeced out of money. I've been promised parts that never came to fruition. I've lost out on what I thought were dream roles. I haven't, there have been times where I've wanted to do something and I couldn't afford to do it because I was like, it's either that or eat. You know what I mean? Um, and yeah, in all of those situations there was a point where I thought, maybe I can't do this, or maybe I shouldn't do this, or maybe this no longer makes sense. um Maybe I don't have what it takes, or maybe this is just not meant for me. Excuse me. But in each of those moments I've had another moment where I've thought, but I wouldn't feel this way about this strongly, this passionate, this connected to this if it wasn't meant for me, or if it wasn't meant to be in my life in some way. So I can either choose now to just hang it up and find something else, or, excuse me, or I can recognize the fact that this is something I've been passionate about since I was a kid. And if I still feel that passion, then that's significant. So don't give up, even if it's going to take you a long time. And here I am 25, 26 years later about to debut a film with Idris Elba. I mean, like, that's no small potatoes, you know what I mean? Um So yeah, I think for me anyway, it's something as simple as that. Like, yeah, if you're passionate about something, I mean, really, if that's the thing that drives you, you're gonna get there. And it may take 20 years, 25, 30 years. It may take a long time. It may happen overnight. But if it's for you, then it's for you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's great.
Yeah. So I don't know. For me, that it's just as simple as that.
No, very solid advice. Very
Yeah.
solid. Okay, and speaking of advice, a secondary question I like to ask. Now, clearly, throughout your many years of getting to the point where you're at, you have been given lots of advice about lots of different things. Now, I have a saying in life, and that's if somebody asked me that question, I just asked you my question, my response would be to keep focused on forward, to keep moving forward. It's very similar to what you just said.
Mm.
But I also have a piece of advice that I carry in my back pocket with me. Something somebody told me when I was 16, my kids are probably sick of me saying it to them. Uh, but I always tell them it doesn't matter how you fall, it's that you get back up.
Mm.
And that's the advice that I was given at 16, 17. I was pretty dark place at that point in my life.
Yeah.
And somebody gave me that advice, and it's always just kind of resonated with me, always stuck back there. So separate from your life motto, what's the one piece of advice that you have been given that always resonates with you, always seems to come back up?
It's funny because I don't know if this counts as advice, but I heard somebody say this. So back when I was, working all the different jobs and I was trying to figure out how to just put food on the table and all this, I and this goes back to how I was in school. I was a horrible student in school. And not because I wasn't smart, it was because I could not make myself sit down and do my homework. And then when it came to working all those jobs, there were times where I was just like, I cannot make myself go in today. Like, I don't want to do this. And it would always come down to, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to, I don't feel like it. My laziness. And I remember, I think it was B. Arthur on an episode of The Golden Girls. This is so random. But
Love
there's an
it.
episode where yeah, in fact, it's Blanche's nephew who's come to visit, and he's getting ready to run away in the middle of the night, and B. Arthur stops him, and he's like, I don't, he's basically saying, oh, I've got all this stuff to do and I just don't feel like doing any of it. And she was just like, you want to run away because you have crappy stuff to do? Everyone has crappy stuff to do. The president has crappy stuff to do. And I just remember thinking, like, oh, that's so true. We all have to do crappy stuff. And it doesn't mean you have to do it all the time. It just means right now, like for the next 2 hours, I've got crappy stuff to do. So I've got to go do it. I don't know why, but anytime when I'm procrastinating or feeling lazy or feeling just like, you know, oh, there's a job I should take, but I don't want to take it because it's crappy. It's the first thing I always think of is even the president has crappy stuff to do, but it just means you still have to do it. You know
Right?
what I mean? To get to the next thing that you want to do, you got to do the crappy stuff first.
Well, I think that's great advice, but I think it's even better that it's from the Golden Girls. So
Yeah, I don't know.
no, that's great. I think that's wonderful. So yeah, so keep moving forward and put up with your stuff, even if you got crappy stuff to
You
do.
do. Everyone has
I think
crappy
that's
stuff to do.
great.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, very cool. So all right, so let's look forward to what's the name of the movie again?
Concrete Cowboy.
Concrete Cowboy. All right. Well, we're going to look forward to that. Hopefully, early 2021, and
Yes.
hopefully, it's all our theaters are opened back up, and people have worn masks and kept themselves safe, and we can hopefully kiss this.
Oh, this one's gonna be on Netflix,
It's going to be on
so you
Netflix. All right.
all will have an opportunity to see it. It's
Even
could not
better.
be made easier for you.
Even better. All right, folks, re-up your Netflix accounts and make sure
Come
they're good
on,
to go.
Netflix.
All right. Well, cool beans. Well, thank you so much, Liz, for being on today. I think your story is it's very refreshing. It's a very down to earth, very, very everyday story for that, people, I think, will be able to identify this with this, because it's not necessarily the fact that we're all actors, because
Right.
clearly we're not, but having to chase your life's dream, and the highs and the lows that come with that. So thank you for sharing those and being so open with us today.
Thank you very much. And keep doing this show because we need more shows like this where we talk about these kinds of things
Oh,
without
thank you.
stigma attached. So I really appreciate it. And I'm glad you asked me to be here because,
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
I love
I'm
it.
thrilled to have had you. All right, folks, I think that's going to conclude us today for Focused on Forward. Well, that concludes another episode of Focused on Forward. To be a guest of Focused on Forward, you can reach us through Twitter at podcastfof, through our Facebook page named Focused on Forward, or through email focusedonforward@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing each and every one of your stories that has yet to be told. So until then, be safe, be kind, and be loving to one another as you stay focused on forward.